there are really three functions for any convention, and this was an issue for both the Republicans and the Democrats. Number one, the convention needs to formalize the nomination of their party's candidate. Both of them obviously did that. That's the technical piece. The second piece is they need to motivate the base. They need to pull together the party and motivate and inspire the base. You clearly saw that at the Republican convention, and I think you saw that at the Democratic convention. Particularly Monday was the challenging time, but when Senator Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and others got up there and spoke, you could feel a coming together of the Democrats here. But the third essential function of a political convention, a national political convention, is to then begin to reposition the candidate to start reaching out to independents, to people who aren't naturally affiliated with that party, to try to broaden the base. And there I think you saw a contrast between the two-party conventions. There seemed to be very little of that at the Republican convention, and there was a lot of that effort at the Democratic convention. Well, I think you've seen a little bit of a bump that Donald Trump has enjoyed in the polls after his convention. There'll probably be a bit of a bump that Hillary Clinton will enjoy after this convention. Then nobody in America pays attention to politics in the month of August. People will go away, they'll settle, and the polls will begin to settle back down and really start to come together in early September, when we're about 2 months out of the convention. And that's the point when people should really start paying attention to where the polls are and what kind of movement there is. And there are three things that will happen in the fall that are absolutely critical, and that's the presidential debates. And my bet is the first presidential debate, which takes place during the last week of September, will probably have more viewers than the Academy Awards, the Oscars. There will be a lot of interest in watching Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton debate, and that'll be very, very important. First of all, both conventions presented a starkly different view of America. Ironically, the view of America that the Democrats presented was much more in line with the Ronald Reagan, It's Morning in America, optimistic, shining city on a hill kind of view of America. And the Republican convention was much more consistent with the negative view of America that the Democrats were presenting back in 1968, 1972 with the anti-war movement and a lot of the anger that came about then. So it's interesting to see how the parties have almost flipped. In terms of foreign policy, I think there's a very stark difference. I think that that Donald Trump actually represents more of a departure from what has been the traditional Republican and Democratic bipartisan consensus on foreign policy that proceeds from the assumption that America's national interest is built on a foundation of a strong relationship with Europe, a strong commitment to NATO, and the whole idea that our international economic engagement with our allies and around the world leads to increased prosperity both at home and elsewhere, and that ultimately plays into our national security. I think Hillary Clinton represents a continuation of that approach. Donald Trump represents more of a departure from that because he really comes from a much more isolationist wing of American politics that exists in both parties, candidly, because I think Bernie Sanders also represented that. And so you do have a different point of view in terms of foreign policy that will undoubtedly be a subject of discussion during these presidential debates. Well, it's historic. This is something that Germany is obviously used to with Angela Merkel, and, the UK is now, for the second time, has a female leader, but we have never had a woman nominated as president. And I have to tell you, I thought Michelle Obama put it right, and as the father of three girls, I feel this too, which is when she thanked Hillary Clinton for the fact that her daughters can now take it for granted that any girl can grow up to be president of the United States, whether Hillary wins or not.